Good day, ma'am. This is Jofelyn Garsula, and for now, I will discuss about IT risks, specifically its three main types, namely environmental risks, process risks, and lastly, decision-making risks. Under the environmental risk, we have capital availability and competitor. Next, we have the process risk, and under this, we have operational risk and financial risks. And lastly, we have information for decision-making risk, and under this, we have strategic risk and operational risks. So let's go over first with environmental risks. So these are risks that have a material environmental effect on the business. So under that, we have the capital availability. With the lack of capital, the company suffers inadequate financial capacity to cover its necessary expenses, cannot purchase equipment, or not being able to launch a new product. It affects specific areas in the entity. Number one, we have financially, so it cannot anymore address its necessary expenses. Number two, we have its operations, so it might be the reason on the discontinuance of its operations, and even in the aspect of marketing. So, what would happen if the lack of capital is not immediately mitigated? So, number one, it won't be very attractive in the eyes of potential investors and financial lenders. Number two, it cannot cover its daily operations because if the entity struggle to basic expense, then how much more on new opportunities? And lastly, it prohibits the entity to expand and to grow bigger because having capital, it serves as a main support of its operations. And now let's have the second topic under the environmental risk. We have the competitor. So a competitor is any business or any organization that competes against the entity. So if an entity is trying to beat you in a race, then that is your competitor. So in business, a competitor is called as a rival. Having a competitor can affect financially, of course, its operations, and as well as its marketing aspect. If the competitors are not properly addressed by the entity might face financial loss and experience the most struggles, potentially harming the business. They might put their employees at risk. It's not easy to decide whom to hire. They might fire, lay off, and it's not easy to give pay raises. And now let's proceed to the second type of risk named as process risk. It is a loss in revenue as a result of ineffective and inefficient processes. Under this risk, we have first operations risk. So it is the loss due to day-to-day operations of an organization. So this risk is due to human error, information technology, insufficient processes, process failure, and even quality risk. These risks specifically affects its operations. It impacts the financial status of the entity and the overall organization. If the risks in its operations are not immediately addressed by the entity, it might result to number one, there might be a reduction in its customer satisfaction or no satisfaction at all. Number two, it might damage the entity's reputation. Number three, there might be or a greater possibility of a product or project failure. And lastly, a financial damage on the side of the entity. And now let's have the second risk under the process risk. It is called financial risk. So financial risk, it is losing money on an investment. So it is the possibility that shareholders will lose money when they invest on the company as the company suffers inefficiency and ineffectiveness of its processes. With the lack of financial stability, then this would greatly affect its operations and the financial status of the entity. So, if this risk is not properly managed at the right time with the right strategies, then this would result to the following. Number one, this would damage the financial status and the reputation of the entity. Number two, this would be a loss of confidence of its investors and lenders. And number three, there would be a difficult to overcome such great challenges. And now let's have the last type of IT risk named as information for decision making risk. So what are these? So these are the risks specifically on the information that the entity gathered in order to make a sound decision and how to work with it. Under this risk, we have strategic risk. So it is the chance that a strategy will result in losses. It is the risk of failed business decisions that may overthrow the company. For proper planning is highly vital. With the existing risk in its strategies, no, this would affect its operations, its financial and marketing aspect, its strategies, and the overall performance of the company. If these strategic risks are not immediately mitigated, then number one, this would result to a greater possibility that consumer will shift. Number two, there would be a legal and regulatory change. Number three, this would raise competition. Number four, the entity failed to realize the full value of its business, and this would put the business at risk. And lastly, there would be financial loss. And now let's proceed to the second risk under the information for decision risk. We have the operational risk. So this risk is the lack of effective and accurate information that often leads to risk towards the entity's day-to-day operation. So there are no proper pricing, no measurement, no accuracy, and it lacks completeness. The areas affected includes its financial and marketing aspects as well as its operations. If this risk is not immediately addressed or mitigated, then this would result to the following. Number one, this would disrupt the business operations. Number two, this produces misleading results. Number three, this increases cost. Number four, this there would be a loss on its productivity. And lastly, this results to a financial loss. So there we have it, the three main types of IT risk. Thank you so much and have a good day.